Gotta unmute myself. Hello, and thank you for joining me this afternoon. Today, we're going to be talking through 7 steps for successful digital transformation. So, to get us started, a couple of weeks ago, I was out on a run and I was thinking through this analogy between digital transformation and physical fitness or healthy living. And I made a post on LinkedIn, which hopefully a handful of you have seen, talking about those similarities. And there was one of these specific similarities that resonated with me really strongly when I was thinking through this analogy. And it's that one here on the screen of a high failure rate between health and fitness and digital transformation initiatives within organizations. And when you do a Google search of the term digital transformation, it brings back over 190 million different search results. And when you search the word fitness, you get back a whopping 4.6 billion different search results. But we're constantly being inundated with these messages that both digital transformation and physical fitness are critical to our businesses and ourselves, respectively. But if they're so critical, why is it difficult for us to break down this path to success? And I think the answer is because we overcomplicate it. Whether it's physical fitness or digital transformation, it's not rocket science. But don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that it's easy. But sometimes the advice with successful transformation, or then again, going back to that analogy, physical fitness and health seem obvious, but it really requires us to take a step back, evaluate our own individual circumstances, and make a plan of attack or reevaluate what's working and what's not. And I think that that's a really important correlation between these two ideas to pull forward for the rest of our conversation today as well. Every person and every business is unique, and no physical fitness or digital transformation journey is going to look identical, and there will be similarities, and there are certainly best practices that you should fold into your approach. But to me, this impactful idea of it being uniquely your own and figuring out what your own journey looks like is critical to that path of success. My name is Ema Roloff, and thank you again for coming today for the conversation. In addition to my role here at Naviant, helping our customers manage their digital transformations and implementations of technology solutions, over the last 2 years, I've developed a YouTube and LinkedIn series called the Digital Transformation Talks. And over the course of that series, I've had the opportunity to sit down with over 100 different experts in the world of digital transformation. And today, I'll be sharing some of those insights and trends that I've seen from not only working with my customers, but also what those experts are continuing to echo in those conversations. So, if digital transformation looks different for every company, how do we define it in a meaningful way? It's not that the definition of digital transformation changes, but rather your approach to finding success being unique to your own specific strengths and weaknesses. So this definition that I have on the screen is just what you can find by looking it up on Wikipedia. But my own personal definition, I would like to say, has a little bit more flair or meat to it. And I'm going to read that definition to you, and then I'm going to focus onto a specific idea. Digital transformation is, again, a really broad topic that touches on everything from technology platforms to less tangible concepts like culture and change management. And successful transformation is really a strategic initiative within your organization that focuses on serving your digitally savvy customers and employees with new operating models driven by data and enabled by technology. So this is not simply digitizing your existing processes. A true transformation focuses on streamlining those processes, eliminating manual work, and creating a culture of innovation. But again, that's so many words that I just said and put up on the screen. So I want to focus us on one specific idea from that definition. And that is this idea of digital transformation being enabled by technology. I I'm going to say it now and say it again later in the presentation and maybe even sprinkle it in a couple of other times. But to me, digital transformation is not about technology, it's about people. We are enabling these much bigger concepts like an innovative culture, efficient work streams, data-driven decisions with technology. How tools are implemented or what tools are even needed and how they're rolled out to your company is again going to be dependent on your individual organization. So back in the introduction of the conversation, I shared that idea of a high failure rate being a common theme that I see between digital transformation and physical fitness. And every company knows that they need to change the way that they work, but research organizations like Forbes shares that 70% of digital transformations fail. And I personally think a lot of those failures are kind of driven by some of these less tangible ideas, but I want to dive into some of these before we get into those 7 steps for success, just in case any of these are resonating, so you can perk up your ears and kind of listen to those specific steps that might address some of the challenges that you're experiencing within your own organization. So the first of those common challenges that we see, both from experience with our customers, conversations that I've had, but also from the Forbes Tech Council list that I'm going to share with you today, is a lack of a data strategy. It's really hard to make data-driven decisions if you don't have a data strategy in place. Up next is going to be missing the mark on process redesign. So going back to that idea of being enabled by technology, we're not looking at strictly bringing in technology over the top of outdated processes or inefficient work streams. If you're not taking the time to reevaluate the way that you're doing something and enable that new way of working with technology, you're missing a pretty foundational component of what digital transformation is meant to do. Up next, and we're going to talk a lot about this as we get into these steps for success, is the idea of resistance to change. More than you would expect, change management and your team not embracing new platforms or new ways of working can often be what tanks an overarching strategy from being really successful. Then we look at the idea of stretching legacy tools too far, legacy technology, old platforms, or old ways of working because it's not broken. And we continue to kick that can down the road and continue to stretch out or elongate our process rather than addressing the issue when we have the time and the bandwidth to fix it before it becomes a problem. Closely tied to culture of innovation is this nice little spaghetti fear monster. And fear of failure is a really big hindrance to innovation within an organization, which is closely tied to the idea of digital transformation. And if you don't have a culture within your organization that supports new ideas and your team is afraid that if a new idea fails, that innovation is going to stop really quickly. Then we have looking at the right internal competencies or right skill sets to be able to scale and move your digital transformation forward. And we'll talk more about how to kind of address that and ways to build digital literacy within your organization as well. And then these last 2 challenges I think are pretty closely tied to one another. And it's going to be the lack of a shared vision in your organization. And that means across departments, across the entire organization. Transformation is not transformation if it's limited to one department. It can't be just your accounting department or just HR or operations that moves forward. You can't only fix the channels that your customers engage with and not fix your operations behind the scenes, because you're not going to be able to deliver on expectations then. And last but not least is going to be this idea of unclear expectations of what digital transformation is going to bring to your organization. You need to be able to move beyond just thinking about the cost of a solution or overestimating what the benefits are going to be. You need to have a reasonable timeline and understanding of what transformation is going to look like for you and your organization in order to be successful. And now, the part that we've all been waiting for is looking at these 7 steps for success. So, enough about talking about where we go wrong. Let's start talking about how we can build a strategy that's going to help us win. And this is the part where I'm going to put on my digital transformation personal trainer hat, going back to that analogy that we're pulling through this presentation today. Not qualified to help you get into better physical shape, but I can share what I've seen companies do and what I've heard echoed time and time again in that interview series that I've been doing for the last 2 years. So we're going to go through our little checklist here, and you might be confused why there's only 5 here, but some of them are grouped together, and I promise I will share all 7 of those steps. So up first, we're going to talk about defining that transformation and what that journey is going to look like for your own individual organization. So I think, again, when we're looking back at that analogy of a personal trainer, the first thing that they're going to do with you when you go in for your first appointment is they're going to sit down with you and they're going to talk to you about what your goals are. And they're going to probably move through some sort of benchmark assessment. So they might take your weight, they might do some body measurements, they might ask you to run a mile or lift some weight so that they can figure out what that starting point looks like and be really truthful and authentic in what that starting point looks like. And you need to do the same when you're building your digital transformation strategy, or for those of you that are already on that path, reevaluating what that strategy looks like for your organization. You need to sit down and ask some tough questions and really evaluate where you might run into challenges or where you think it's going to be really easy for you to find success. So maybe your organization has a culture that's really rooted in tradition, and you have a lot of employees that have a long tenure on your team. That's a great thing. You've got a lot of experience to lean into, but your transformation journey and your change management specifically is going to look very different than a 10-year-old company who's building off of a foundation of success. And on the flip side, if you have a company that is constantly changing and moving and agile, maybe that's a bit of a blessing and a curse for your team because you're always moving so fast that you never take the step of going back and optimizing and working on continuous improvement. So these types of insights are going to be the things that you really need to sit down and be honest as an organization on where your company's, what's working for you, what's not. What's going to make your company or your customers' lives easier? And what's your biggest differentiator? And while you're going through this process, you're going to start to uncover where you need to be prepared to counteract challenges and also make sure that you're retaining that part of your culture that serves you and your customers really well. Up next is looking at getting your executive buy-in early in the process as a part of your strategy. So if you remember back in that slide again with all those words, I brought up the phrase digital transformation being a strategic initiative. And that's where these words are going to kind of come back to haunt us, so to speak. When I say executive buy-in in this context, I don't mean getting one project signed off by one executive. That is great and hopefully will help you start to build momentum, but you want to make sure that it is a strategic initiative across the organization with that shared vision that we're talking about, and making sure that your whole executive team develops a sense of what I like to call digital literacy. And that idea of digital literacy is tied to clarity of what types of technology are driving innovation and a basic understanding of how those tools work. Now, your CEO does not need to be a developer. Your chief people officer doesn't need to understand all of the subcontext or subsets of AI, but they do need to have enough clarity so that they can make the jump of how these tools are going to bring value into your organization that allows them to also speak on that value. There's tons of free resources available to help your executive team build that digital literacy. My shameless plug for the digital transformation talks, or the thousands of other countless podcasts that might be out there, or also finding articles that are written about how your competitors are going about their digital transformation. Spending time looking at their website and maybe doing a quick write-up of what you see in the industry and providing that to your executive team. And another really helpful resource is things like industry events or conferences that are, user conferences from software vendors that you might already be working with. I've done a number of kind of those what is AI type presentations at different industry events focused on insurance or HR to help people start to build this digital literacy and understand the art of the possible. And this clarity and vision of how value is being brought into the organization is going to be incredibly important when it comes to having expectations that you can meet. Once your executive team starts to have a better understanding of how this technology works and where it can bring value into your organization, they are going to start to align their expectations with the things that I think are maybe where we're getting these flags of failed digital transformation. So overestimating benefits, underestimating costs, expecting transformation to happen overnight. When your team starts to truly understand what's coming from digital transformation, they're going to understand what that timeline looks like and that it's likely going to be a multi-year transformation if we're truly going to change the way our organization works. And they'll understand that it's also not a silver bullet that's going to change or solve every problem that you have, but rather a tool along on that process of becoming a company that can compete in today's market. This is going to be one of my spots where I've got a double check mark for you. So we're going to talk about the idea of thinking big, starting small, and acting fast. So thinking differently is really hard. And the idea of thinking outside the box really doesn't inspire me. I don't know about everybody here on the webinar today, but that concept doesn't really do much for me. But Sydney Madison Prescott, who's the head of intelligent automation at Spotify, shared a quote that really kind of like has come into my brain and lives there now. And it's this idea of forgetting that the box ever existed. Now, that doesn't seem like a super concrete idea either, but what I think that this idea or that statement gives us the ability to do is start to think outside the confines of just our own individual industries. I have a client who uses Uber Eats as an example of their ideal customer experience and communication strategy moving forward. And spoiler alert, they are a healthcare technology company. They don't do anything with food delivery or transportation, but they recognize that our customer expectations are changing based off of our favorite brands and the brands that we're loyal to, regardless of industry. So Uber or Amazon have kind of broken us for all other traditional kinds of businesses because our expectations of what a customer experience look like have completely changed. So while you're thinking through what you want your company to look like in 5 years, you almost have to stop and ask yourself, if I started this business from the ground up today, what would it look like? And again, these questions aren't easy to answer, but when you can break out of those preconceived notions about your business and your industry and start to focus on this big picture of what you want your organization to look like, it's going to help unlock a lot of new innovative ideas versus focusing narrowly to get started on how do I automate this specific workflow, or how do I replace this specific spreadsheet. We'll get there as we start the journey of moving kind of to this next idea of starting small and acting fast. After that large vision is set, then you take a step backward and you look at how you can break that vision down into manageable components and move through those in a quick fashion that allows you to not only build momentum behind your digital transformation initiative, but also prove out the concept about why you're doing this. You know, I chose this video of these nice little mountain bikers doing something I would never dare to do on a bike because I have this vision of my mind of that small effort to push them down the hill, begin to build momentum, and then they have to act fast as they're gaining that momentum and moving down the hill. They need to learn from the environment around them and act quickly to adapt to the changes that are coming towards us. Once you break down that larger vision into manageable steps, some of the questions that you can start to ask yourselves to kind of build that long strategy are things like, where do our priorities lie as far as order of implementation go? What's going to have the biggest impact and drive the most value for our organization? And what are the key roles and those players that need to be involved in our transformation along the way? And I think that last question gives me a really nice segue into my personal favorite topic of change management. So I warned you at the beginning that I was going to say it again. So now's the time for me to say it again. Digital transformation is not about technology. It's about people. Your employees are people. Your executives are people. Your board, your customers, anybody interacting with the technology tools that you bring into the organization are people. And it can be really easy to get caught up in all of the nuances of technology. We implement technology here at Naviant. That stuff is important, but ultimately, you have to make sure that you're going to get adoption of the new tools that you're building, and change management and paying attention to the people is going to be what gets you there. I did an interview with Mel Gillen, who is a part of the team at Farwell, which is a change management consulting firm. And she shared 5 signs that you may have missed the mark on change management with me. And I really like this concept, and I think it does a really great way of translating from what are the signs that we're seeing and what does that point to in our strategy that maybe we need to adjust or course correct with. So the first one is going to be down here with that nice little confused, maybe drunk smiley face there. And when we start to see confusion with our team, that likely points to an idea of an unclear vision or a vision that hasn't been shared across the organization. And again, for us to be successful, it can't be siloed to one department. We need to have a shared vision of what our transformation is going to look like moving forward to be successful. Right here, smack dab in the middle of your screen, is the angry face of resistance. And this is typically where we see most change management going awry, or the biggest indicator that maybe we haven't paid attention to sharing the why behind our transformation. And we'll talk a little bit more about this specific idea of sharing the why, but if your team is resisting the change, finding workarounds, or not adopting your solution, it's likely because they don't understand the why behind it. When you start to see anxiety, that's likely tied to the skill set that your team needs to be successful in your new ways of working. So you need to make sure that your team does not feel anxious about what their future looks like because they don't have the right skills. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. A false start or a limited transformation to one department is likely going to come down to resources. And if they have the right resources to be able to scale transformation across the organization. We see it pretty frequently that IT departments feel so strapped by trying to implement and support technology across the whole organization, or even end users that are involved in an implementation still having a day job that they need to do. And so making sure that your team has the appropriate resources and is staffed well enough to be able to manage an implementation appropriately rather than starting and stopping and starting and stopping is also key. And then last but not least is this idea of frustration. And that's likely going to be kind of tied to the idea of vision, but it's going to be, do you have a clear plan that is sustainable for your team? And I would also argue that that frustration can be a sign of not knowing the why or having enough resources as well. So how do you manage the change? And what do you do as an organization to make sure you're not missing the mark? Well, I like to advocate for these 3 really simple steps at a bare minimum for your change management. folks like the team at Farwell may have a lot more nuanced approaches for how to manage change, but at a very minimum, we need to make sure that we're starting by communicating that why. And when I say that why, I don't just mean starting at, we know we need to change, so this is why we're doing it, but really diving into what is it going to do for your customers, what is it going to do for your teams internally, and also sharing that why to people that aren't necessarily directly impacted. And especially for that team that's working in those new systems or changing the way that they work, you need to make sure that they can take that greater why and turn it into a what's in it for me statement or a with them statement. Because at the end of the day, internally, we're all selfish creatures, and we like to understand why we're doing something and how it's going to benefit us. So make sure that your team understands that benefit to them directly. They will support it, they will help you along the way, but they need to understand why they're doing it. Throughout your entire implementation, you need to make sure that you're communicating clearly and regularly. From the point that you're deciding what solution to implement to after you go live, communicate the good, the bad, the ugly, share it with your team and have a sense of transparency that brings them along on the journey. And then ultimately, once you get to that point where you have implemented a solution or gone live with a new process, take a moment to celebrate it and recognize the work that it's taken for your team to get there. Personally here at Naviant, we just went through a Salesforce implementation, and my little change management heart was so pleased to see that our team went through this process. I wasn't involved in the day-to-day implementation. I'm an end user of the platform. But starting at the very beginning, when we were evaluating what tools we were going to bring in, they shared the why. They helped us get to that point where we had a what's in it for me statement. Throughout the entire implementation, they communicated with us on where we were at and how we were performing based off of our timelines or where we might have run into challenges. And then we even had a nice celebratory lunch on Monday when our tool went live, and we did a nice round of applause for our system admin who was so critical to us being able to go live with the project. So it can be a really simple plan, but you can't ignore it or it's going to catch up to you. And then our last two items here, again, going to kind of be doubled up under this idea of the right skill set. So just the way that you need to build that digital literacy with your executive team, you need to do it with the rest of your team, and you need to bring them along on that journey. It's critical to make sure that your employees are feeling like they have a voice in the process of transforming, and that they have the right training and opportunities to be involved when it's appropriate. You need to ensure that the people that are closest to your customers and closest to those processes are a part of your feedback loop when it comes to implementing those solutions. Because if they are not, and the solution isn't what they need it to be, they're going to find workarounds and they're not going to adopt it. And moreover, you need to make sure that they've got not only the technical skills to click the buttons and do the things, but also the soft skills to be able to manage the type of work that's going to come to them when you've truly transformed. Our goal with transformation is not to replace employees with automation and just have a bunch of robots running our processes. The idea is that those manual repetitive tasks are taken care of by automation so that our people can do the inherently human things within our business. And when we're focused on those inherently human things, soft skills become a lot more important. Does everybody on your team know how to manage exceptions? Do they know how to do the hard stuff? So make sure that you're helping support the technical and the soft skills that are needed for them to be successful. And last but not least is finding the right partners to support your journey. I would certainly be remiss if I didn't share that my team here at Naviant and I would love to be a part of the equation for your digital transformation. But I also recognize that selecting a partner has a lot of different factors tied to it. And as I've shared a number of times today, this transformation doesn't look the same for everyone, and now might not be the right time for us to work with you. But I would love the opportunity to sit down with you, talk through your specific journey, and help connect you with the right people if we're not the right fit to help make it happen. But even if you're not working with Naviant, a couple of things that you need to keep in mind when you're looking for a partner to help you with digital transformation is somebody that's going to help you along this whole journey of crawling, walking, and running. Look for a partner who is educational focused and wants to help you learn and support and sustain your transformation on your own. Make sure that they also are looking at all of the aspects that we've talked today about digital transformation. So people, process, and technology, and that they're not simply just putting in a solution that comes out of the box and walking away, because you're not going to have a sustainable change if that's the approach that you're taking. So with that, again, we talked about that idea of what transformation is, those common challenges, and 7 steps for success along the way. I'm going to stay on. I know we're at time to answer any questions that might come in, but I want to again leave you with this message of recognizing that your transformation is going to be your own journey. And hopefully Naviant can be a part of the process of helping you figure out what that roadmap to success looks like. But thank you for joining me, everybody, and please feel free to reach out via email or LinkedIn if you've got any questions at all. So I did have one question that came in that is looking at when is it appropriate to bring in a partner like Naviant or any other vendor into your digital transformation. And I think the time is early so that you can evaluate what those options look like. Now, again, a company that's going to help support your transformation in an authentic way will understand that that might not mean an immediate sale or immediate partnership, but they'll help ask and guide you through those questions, or again, kind of play that role of your personal trainer through your digital transformation. So helping you evaluate when is it the right time to bring in a new technology tool, when is it time to adjust your approach slightly with current tools that you have in place, or when you can just kind of improve your process and not change your technology tools. So I would encourage you to certainly look for partnerships early in your journey that can help you kind of through that crawl stage before you get to the walking and running stage of things. All right, please feel free to put any other questions that you have into that question box. Oh, and I do see another one, hold on. And yes, there will be a recording available. It should go out early next week. And as promised in the invite for the webinar, there's also going to be an exclusive video for people that registered for this, where it is looking at interviews that kind of support and talk through these ideas for success as well. So keep an eye out for both the webinar recording as well as that kind of exclusive YouTube video as well. Okay, well, I see a few more people dropping off. Please feel free to, again, reach out to me via LinkedIn or email if you have any further questions. I'm certainly happy to help as needed, but thank you again for joining me, everybody, and have a wonderful day.